It was the winter of 2020. They lived in the big cream house up the road from the station. To the six of them, it was the most important place of all. Within the house, small, scrappy dogs and extravagant evening meals could be found. The often malfunctioning central heating was combated by a single small space heater that they bought from Argos. They would gather around it ceremoniously to eat their cereal. She was one of them, and on one November morning, she made her breakfast. She turned her back to him, knowing that as soon as her attention was grabbed by the sizzling of butter in the pan and the need to promptly turn down the heat, that he would pick up his phone and start browsing articles about running, swimming, or cycling. He was a triathlete after all. He would be leaning back in his chair in precisely the manner that she asked him not to, his legs outstretched and crossed at the ankle. He didn't believe that the past 2 chair breakages were anything to do with him. She poured the whisked egg mixture into the increasingly foaming butter, making sure not to season the eggs with salt before cooking. This was a rule that she followed, as the internet told her that salting eggs prematurely would cause some sort of chemical. She could not, however, remember whether this would make them too runny or too sticky. In any case, it was a snippet of random knowledge which, no matter how true, was what she told herself made the perfect scrambled eggs. That, as well as the tips and tricks she had learned from YouTube videos posted by various chefs. Dragging the unsalted eggs around the pan, she thought to herself, "Isn't this nice? Eggs in the morning with the boy I love." She could not bring herself to think of him as a man, perhaps mirroring her inability to think of herself as a woman, but instead as a girl. She didn't feel old enough or settled enough. It was all just fun and games. They were just playing house. She thought about the dog walk they would go on after breakfast, and about how amazing it was to have a dog in the house, how grown up it was, and how responsible they were. She thought about the bench they would sit on, and about how glad she was that it wasn't drizzling and grey like it was yesterday. The eggs were catching at the bottom of the pan. She turned the flame off and mixed furiously. Gordon Ramsay's video instructed to do this for soft, creamy eggs, and she liked soft, creamy eggs, and her breakfast companion liked the eggs that she liked. She then returned the pan to a low heat.
Bucket, only early 2010s indie rock from now. They really don't make them like this anymore. Bucket, how they know how to capture pure bliss in a tune literally sends me to a different dimension. I want to go back, please. Bucket, only early 20.
Thank you for being here.
This gave the summer morning before primary school vibe, putting on your summer dress
and sticky sun cream to go sit and make daisy chains. This
I'm Mr. Loverman, and I miss my Loverman. I'm Mr. Loverman. Oh, and I miss my.
Thank you for being here.
Her mind drifted back to the previous morning. Yesterday when she was making breakfast, he had stood up from the table, walked around it, and then sleepily hugged her from behind while she was at the cooker. Today he was quiet and still, eyes intent on his phone screen. "How are you feeling?" she asked, turning to him, wooden spoon in hand. He stared at his phone, and for a moment she thought he was going to ignore her. She was ready to be frustrated and have to repeat herself. As if he had taken a hint from her irritated brainwaves, he did an over-exaggerated stretch while he placed his phone face down on the table, far away from him. "I'm happy as a clam," he exclaimed through a yawn. This made her laugh, a lot. Maybe too much for what had been said. But it was funny to her, the phrasing of it, the intonation. She found so much of what he said to be funny. He had a way of delivering it so perfectly. She sang back at him, "If you're happy as a clam, clap your hands." He grinned and chuckled. Clapping whilst getting to his feet, he then began to do his funny dance. His hands were balled up and he wiggled his arms in an idiosyncratic way. They continued to gleefully make up the words to their song, laughing breathlessly and grinning.
Where'd all the time go? It's starting to fly. Can it? 'Cause I'm a young man. Let go. Quand tu ris, j'adore. Quand je ris aussi, j'adore. Pourquoi te changer le décor? But the rap coming
As they danced around, he finished off the song with, If you're happy as a clam, clap your ham. They embraced. Gosh, we really are in love, aren't we? It was the sort of thing she would say jokingly at the time, but she wasn't really joking. Yes, we are, he said with a humoured sigh. She served the eggs with some buttered toast, and it was at this point that she sprinkled over a pinch of salt. They sat quietly across from each other looking at their phones, taking it in turns to tell the dog, down, when she put her paws up and begged for scraps. The scrambled eggs really were excellent. They lived on the other side of town, near the park on a big hill. In his room, a bike took pride of place set up in front of a monitor. On his mantelpiece there were books and a strange blue figurine from the British Museum that looked a little bit like a monkey. At hers, she had a matching blue model of a scarab beetle. On a February morning, his alarm went off, chiming from the floor next to him. She hid her phone under the pillow beneath her head and pretended to be asleep. She had actually been awake for almost half an hour looking at puppies available nearby on Gumtree. She felt the mass next to her stir and unfurl from its curled up position as the alarm continued to ring out. The dog saw this from her vantage point. She had been curled up in a similar way at the foot of the bed. Taking his movement as her cue, she leapt onto him. He reached down, turned off the alarm, and began to scratch under the dog's chin. She hoped that he would assume that she had slept through the alarm and leave her in bed while he went downstairs and sorted the dog out. She was not yet prepared to leave the warmth of the bed and a room in which a radiator was blaring out heat. The downstairs of the house was freezing and cavernous, the underfurnished living room and the under-equipped kitchen of a 4-bed, all-male student house. She faced the wall with her eyes shut. The dog crept close to her and gave her a sniff before jumping to the floor. He followed it to the door, and they left the room. She could hear him yawn as he made his way down the hall. She smiled and rolled onto her back, retrieving her phone and returning to puppy browsing. A little while later, she smelled bacon cooking. When they first met, he could barely cook beans on toast. But breakfasts, among a number of other dishes, had become a real talent of his over the years. She lay in the moment for a few more seconds. She was so warm, and her love was downstairs with her small dog, who they loved, and he was cooking her breakfast, and he loved her. Thinking in this way often made her feel emotional. She got out of bed and put on a jumper that had a plane on it and a pair of socks. She wished that she had a second pair of socks to layer and keep her feet warmer, but she was banned from borrowing his as she would always lose them. In this house, feet suffered due to the cold floorboards. She made her way down the stairs, every step yielding a sharp creak or crack. They had joked in the past about how the stairs may one day collapse, plunging the unfortunate through into the cellar. Her feet were hurting from the cold, and she walked into the kitchen with a series of heavy thuds as though walking on strange frozen nubs. She acted far less awake than she was and shuffled up next to him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm sleepy and cold," she said. She was hoping that he would find this cute and take some form of pity on her. She saw him smirk out of the corner of her eye. "You know sleepy isn't a real word," he said, while handing her a plate. He then kissed her on the head. She turned to try and kiss him, but he quickly put his hand over her mouth and kissed the back of it, using it as a barrier. No, 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 silly, he said, smiling and shaking his head. Oh yeah, she replied. Oops. She forgot that the day before she thought she might be ill. She felt fine today, but knew that he wouldn't believe her, so there was no point in protesting.
You don't know me.
Hey, don't be surprised if one day I just...
Growing up in the 2000s UK edition, how many of these do you remember?
We were living on Côte d'Ivoire, Old Calvary Lane, Sunland Parade, driving in a Mercury.
I found this CD from 2002 at a thrift store. It says Lula at 10 years old, so I bought it hoping to find the owner.
Hey, Lula. She loves Dobermans, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls. Lula! Come on, Lula! Come, Lula! That's my sweetie.
And I was
Your love's got me high, baby girl. I'm addicted and I'm never coming down.
I don't know what childhood this is, but this is mine.
She walked through to the living room and wedged herself into the corner of the wonky sofa, one side of which had dropped down significantly due to the legs on that side being snapped. Drawing her feet up closer to her, she balanced the plate on her knees. The bottom of the bread roll was saturated with melted butter, which had leaked out and pooled around the sandwich. She ate it quickly. It was delicious.